Welcome back, Wrestling Junkies. Jake Hodges here. Let's get into it. Today we're going to look at Sidakov's slide-by. It's a position that's kind of puzzled me my whole wrestling existence. Just not very good at it. Don't have a very good feel. So let's break it down. Most of what he's going to do is about creating space for the guy to kind of fall into. And we'll watch this clip a couple times. Let's start getting into the details. So the first thing is that his feet aren't really doing much of like that big crow hop jump that some people associate with a slide by like I did. I was like, well, he's probably hopping really big to the side and it's going to make him get this big angle and it'll be good to go. But really all he's doing is making his back foot turn sideways and then stepping. So his back foot is pointed to the side, and all that really does is allow him to get just enough hip rotation to get next to the guy as he slides him by. So it's really not a big crow hop jump like I used to think. He just steps and turns his foot. Now, watch where all his weight goes as he steps. So as he starts to slide this guy by, his foot's light, and it's going to get heavy here. All of his weight goes to his back foot. And this starts to get the guy to lean and fall into him, which is what he wants. He wants the guy moving into him so he can take his momentum and throw it into some space that he creates. All right, his hip turn and his chest lean is what's going to help create that space. Let's back it up just a little bit. So as he starts to go, he's starting to lower his level a little bit and shift that weight to his foot, gets the guy moving forward. Now, his collar tie hand, his back arm, is completely straight. All right, his hand just acts like a hook to hold this guy's head in. That's all it's doing right now. That's literally it. Like it's not pulling. It's just holding this guy's head in. His arm's straight. This allows to create all this space between their bodies. And then as he pulls them through, look, so much space for this guy to fall into. And he creates a space so this guy doesn't hit him on the way through. If he's closer, the guy's head might hit his shoulder, or he might be able to hit his chest, or something's going to stop him from getting this nice quick slide by. So still big space. All right. That comes from his chest turn. So his chest is facing the guy. As he slides him by, his chest turns. So if he wasn't to lean over, he would just turn his chest out that direction. So his turn makes room for the guy's body, and his lean, where his shoulder gets right over top of his knee with his shoulders stacked on top of one another. What I mean by that is his top shoulder straight over his bottom shoulder. They pretty much create a line. That lean he's doing, where he swings it out over his knee, that creates room for this guy's arm to not catch anything. All right, I mean, it helps with the momentum, absolutely it does, but the main thing it's doing is creating all this space. All right, and he brings his head with him too. So his head comes down with him. That way the guy's hand that he's sliding by can't catch onto his head. And if he doesn't bring his head with him, the guy might can push off his face and then square up where he won't be able to get it. Like, his head literally disappears in this clip, actually. So it goes down and then up and away. So he starts to lean, open his chest up, creates a bunch of space. His body is gonna make like a upside down Nike swoosh, I guess that would be, check mark, whatever you want to call it. So it's gonna go down and then up and away. Here it goes down, 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 swings out, and starts coming up. Let's talk about what he does with his head almost every time before his slide by. He's always getting to that opposite side, and this just helps create the space too. If his head's on the same side, the guy's just gonna run into it, and it's not gonna work. So he shifts his head to the far side of his slide by to help create that space. Then he starts his motion, shifts the weight into his back foot, starts to swing his head and shoulder and chest out, and he's got it. When he's doing this slide by, we'll talk about this arm. Most of the time, he's doing it with the guy's like inside tie or on his shoulder or something with his hand. As he goes for the slide by, pulls the guy in, starts to twist. Now he's got a grip on the guy's elbow. So he's going fingers as close to the elbow as he can. Right here. Fingers are going to go close to the elbow. Now, what this does, instead of reaching up higher on the guy's arm, it allows him to keep the guy's arm floating for longer. If you were to try to reach deeper, you're not going to get a good enough bite to pull the guy's arm through, and two, he's going to be able to get his elbow back to his side. So he's hooking right at this guy's elbow to be able to lift his hand and arm through and over. And in some later clips, I'll show that when he hooks, he's not really pulling up. It's his hand really, for the most part, goes in a straight line across. So he's just carrying the guy's arm. He's not trying to lift or anything. What really does the work is his elbow. So as he starts to lean, his elbow starts to rotate straight up. Right. This is what gets his hand off, the guy's hand, the opponent's hand off. As he keeps going through, he's going to point his elbow forward and up where it's out over top of his wrist at an angle. There's better clips for this later. And he's going to slide him through into that space. Here's another one. Looks pretty similar to the last one. Again, not a big crow hop with his feet, just stepping. His foot's turned sideways, enough to start to get his hips to rotate, creating a lot of space between their bodies for the guy to fall into. Hand hooks at his elbow. Elbow's pointing straight up. Collar tie arm, straight as it can be. All that space he's pulling him into. Now look at his elbow here as he pulls him through. So it goes up and then over. Right. So his elbow is in front of his wrist. All right, and what this does is start to pop the guy's hand off and be able to get his arm through. So again, gets the guy to fall into him. Now, most of the time when he's hitting this, he gets the guy's weight on his far foot as he slides him by. A lot of times he'll catch either this guy stepping with his back foot or get him leaning to the side where his far foot is. So he catches the guy stepping, which means he has to pivot off this one. And he ends up getting hip to hip because of it. Now here's a good clip to look at his hand. So his hand's hooked, and it's just gonna go in a straight line through. There's not gonna be much up and down with his hand, so he's not really lifting this guy's arm up. Just straight. Hand stays the same level the whole time. Didn't get much above or below the line that I drew. So as he's starting to pull right here, it's going in a straight line. And it's really a lot to do with his shoulder and elbow as opposed to his hand. His hand's just lifting the guy's arm like a post setup for a double leg or high crotch. Where you just post, but you don't want to push his hand up. You just want to keep it up enough to get underneath it. All right, and this, he's just keeping it up enough to rotate his elbow up and get the guy's arm through. One more clip from this near side angle, and then we'll move on to the far side. This is about as big of a crow hop or hop type motion you'll get with his feet. So just a small foot replace. It's just small steps. It's not a huge hop. Just getting his foot pointed just enough to get his hips to rotate as far as he needs them to. His other foot's just going to step to cover the angle. Now again, look at all the space he creates. He's got straight arm, collar tie, hands just a hook on the guy's neck. Chest starts to open up to turn, and he starts to lean over his back knee. Shoulder starts to lean, shoulders are stacked on top of each other. Head is away. This guy has nothing to grab onto. He's just falling straight into space. Head starts to come back up to get his go behind. And he's got a slide by. Okay, I'm gonna start to look at some clips from the collar tie angle. So the far side of his slide by. Takes a step back, or the guy pushes into him. Either one gets him to move forward. Catches him right in the middle of his step. Getting the guy to lean into him. Again, just a little footstep to change his feet. Head swings, head and shoulder swing out and away as he goes through. Whoop. To create all that space. I mean, just look at the amount of space between the guy's chests. Just so much space for this guy to fall into. Makes it so hard for him to grab anything. All right, now we can really talk about this elbow position. I know this clip's a little blurry, but this guy's hand is still on. Even as he starts to point his elbow up to the ceiling, guy's hand is still on. Now, as his elbow gets in front of his wrist, the guy's hand starts to slip off. So his elbow up, rotates his hand in front of his wrist, makes that angle, as opposed to it being straight up and down. He keeps rotating it through to get that elbow in front, and it makes the guy's hand pop off his arm. Now, as soon as he gets his hand and elbow through, that's when his collar tie hand starts doing work. All right, so again, it's pretty much straight arm hook until he gets that guy's hand and elbow underneath his armpit. Now he's going to start to pull his hand and elbow back toward his own hip. All right, so Sidakov's looking to get his own elbow back toward his hip to close that space that he created off. That way he can stay behind him. So he creates space by leaning his chest and head all out and away. And then once he gets him through, he's closing it off with his collar tie elbow. So he pulls, he's looking to pull this elbow back to his own hip to finish his score. Again, gets the guy to start leaning. Most of the guy's weight's going to be on his outside foot. You can see his heel start to lift up. Sidakov's foot's pointed sideways just enough to get that hip rotation. Starts to turn his chest, get his shoulder out and over top of his back knee. This one's from a collar tie. The opponent has a collar tie. All right, so he does it from both places. It's just most often done when the guy has an inside tie, from what I've seen. He starts to swing his head away. Now, his head swinging away is really important on this one because it's going to get this guy's hand to slip. So his head creates space for the guy's hand to come through with it swinging out and away. Chest creates the space to get his body to come through. Arm is straight for the space, hand's just a hook. Pulls him through, elbow high. And pulls this elbow back toward his side. All right, one last clip here, kind of wrap up the important concepts, and that'll be it. My initial instinct with his feet was wrong until I watched him. At first I thought it was going to be a big crow hop, but instead it's just a couple steps. So he just steps his back foot up a little bit, makes his foot turn just enough so he can get his hips to rotate, so he can get that big swing with his chest. Now the most important part is this upper body rotation plus his lean that goes out and away. All right, this is what creates all the space for the guy to fall into. All right, this creates all the space for everything to miss. Guy can't push off him, guy can't grab him, guy can't put his head on him. All this lean and rotation is the most important. So to get that lean and rotation, he goes shoulder over top of his back knee. Shoulders are stacked on top of each other, and head and chin is just over top of his near shoulder. All right. So that makes his head swing out and away, where the guy looks like the guy even tries to push on it here with his arm, but he can't find it because he's swinging it up or out and away. Right. If I were to point out the most important thing, this would be it. It'd be his lean and chest rotation, creating all that space for the guy to fall into as he gets him to move forward. So straight arm, it allows for the space. Collar tie hand is just a hook. His over tie arm, can't see it here, but in the previous clips we showed that it hooks at the elbow. It's just an easier grip, plus he's able to keep the guy's arm up just enough to get his hand through, as opposed to if he were to grab at the armpit, then he might not be able to get his hand through. As he pulls him through, elbow comes high and gets in front of his own wrist. This is what makes the guy's hand pop off. And if he were to have his head up here, the guy's hand might be able to catch his face and push away. But since he takes it away from him with that space, not a chance. So elbow high, rotates in front of his wrist, get his hand to pop off. All right. Now as he starts to get his elbow through, he's going to take his collar tie hand and pull his elbow back toward his side to close that space off that he created. Closes that space off, and he's going to be able to get his takedown.